Growth in retail sales shows city's economy is recovering. Chief Executive John Lee visits Macau to discuss more cooperation. India's Prime Minister calls for common ground in G20 meeting amid global tensions. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The city's economy is continuing its recovery as normalcy is gradually returning. The value of total retail sales in January increased by 7% compared with the same month last year. That's a rise for 2 months in a row.
Sights of crowded streets are back in Hong Kong again following the resumption of cross-border travel and gradual recovery from the COVID pandemic. The value of total retail sales in January 2023 was up 7% year-on-year, much higher than market expectations. Sales of jewellery, watches and clocks and valuable gifts recorded an increase of more than 23%. It was a 38% jump for Chinese drugs and herbs and a 20% rise for books, newspapers, stationery and gifts. Footwear and other clothing accessories were up by 16%. During the same month last year, residents were scrambling to buy daily necessities in supermarkets amid the fifth wave of the pandemic. As the pandemic eases this year, supermarket prices have decreased by 7.2% in January over a year earlier. Furniture and fixtures dropped 21%. The government said the improved consumer sentiment and the early arrival of the Lunar New Year may have boosted the retail sector. Although the value of total retail sales in January was $2.5 billion more than the previous month, the figure only stood at $36 billion. Compared to the same period in 2018, before the pandemic hit, that's about $10 billion less. Meanwhile, a real estate agent said the number of sales deals for retail properties last month were up 30% compared to the previous month. But the vacancy percentage of shops is still in double digits for some core tourist areas such as Mongkok. He expects the figure will only improve between August and October, the peak season for rentals. The 14th National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or CPPCC, will commence in Beijing this Saturday. Members in Hong Kong took a chartered flight to Beijing to attend the conference earlier today. This morning, members arrived at the Hong Kong International Airport, including Henry Tang, Victor Lee, Margaret Chan, as well as Andy Tsang and Eliza Chan. Closed-loop management will be used in the CPPCC meeting as well as the National People's Congress that will open on Sunday. Chief Executive John Lee led a delegation of senior officials for his first visit to Macau since the full resumption of normal travel. Lee met with Macau's Chief Executive Ho Yat-sing and discussed how the two SARs can cooperate. Mimosa Ngai reports.
At around 11 a.m. this morning, Chief Executive John Lee and his delegation arrived at the Macau government headquarters. They were greeted and welcomed by the Macau Chief Executive Ho Yat-seng and other senior officials, such as the Secretary for Administration and Justice, Andrea Zheng. The two leaders took photos together before Ho introduced the history of the headquarters, a building over 170 years old, to Lee. On his social media, Lee told the Macau leader that tourism is an important sector for both regions. He said Hong Kong will strengthen its connections with Macau and other cities in the Greater Bay Area to create a travel brand for regional and international markets. Lee added the two leaders will look into different ways of organizing large-scale themed events together and promoting the two cities' unique cultures. Meanwhile, Ho said in a press release that he hopes there will be more collaboration between the two regions in areas like finance. This was the second time that the two leaders met in a week. Ho and his delegation visited Hong Kong last Saturday. Mimosa Ngai, TVB News.
Sources say the Hong Kong section of the high-speed rail will resume some long-distance trains next Saturday, while the full resumption date is set for April the 1st. Currently, the Hong Kong section high-speed rail operates 38 round-trip short-distance trains per day going to Shenzhen and Guangzhou. It's believed the high-speed rail services will resume fully from April 1st, going to places such as Beijing and Shanghai. Police have arrested one more man in connection with the murdered model Abby Choi's case. It is understood that he is a friend of Choi's former husband and was arrested on suspicion of criminal facilitation. Authorities concluded their three-day search for Abby Choi's missing remains today at the Northeast New Territories landfill in Takuling. Sources said there have been no new findings. The dismembered body of the 28-year-old was found in Longmei Village rental unit in Taipo last week, shocking the city. Her ex-husband, along with his family members, were arrested and charged in connection with her death. A former employee at a scandal-hit childcare centre in Mongkok has been sentenced to 4.5 months in prison. A 45-year-old woman at the Hong Kong Society for the Protection of Children was found to have pressed the legs of a 2-year-old toddler onto his own face in an incident in December 2021. According to the Kowloon City Magistrates Court, based on the surveillance footage, the woman acted roughly towards the boy who appeared to resist her. The magistrate said the suspect's explanation of relaxing the boy's muscles to help him sleep was illogical. The children's residential home in Mongkok houses about 100 youngsters who were abandoned, orphaned, or lacked care because of family problems. Overseas, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called on foreign ministers from the group of 20 nations to find common ground on global issues. This as he inaugurated a meeting in New Delhi that looks set to be dominated by Russia's war in Ukraine.
You are meeting at a time of deep global divisions. As foreign minister, it is but natural that your discussions are affected by the geopolitical tensions of the day.
In considering these issues, we may not always be of one mind. In fact, there are some matters of sharp differences of opinions and views. Yet, we must find common ground and provide direction, because that is what the world expects of us.
India holds the presidency of the G20 this year. It declined to blame Russia for the war and has sought a diplomatic solution while sharply boosting its purchases of Russian oil. However, European and US delegates have reiterated that they hold Russia responsible for the conflict. The meeting is being attended by 40 delegations, including Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Still to come on tonight's news. The US is poised to sell missiles for fighter jets to Taiwan. The United States has approved the potential sale of $619 million worth of new weapons to Taiwan. Beijing says it opposes the planned new sale to Taiwan. The weapons include missiles for Taiwan's F-16 fleet as the island reported a second day of large-scale Chinese Air Force incursions nearby. The arms sales are likely to further sour already tense relations between Beijing and Washington. Beijing has repeatedly demanded such deals to stop, viewing them as support for Taiwan. Taiwan's defense ministry said the weapons would help defend the airspace to deal with threats and provocations from Beijing. The United States Trade Representative has released President Joe Biden's 2023 policy agenda and the 2022 annual report to Congress. Part of the report was critical of China. Meanwhile, the U.S. House of Foreign Affairs Committee voted to give President Biden the power to ban Chinese-owned TikTok. Beijing calls the vote to ban TikTok unreasonable. Tracy Furness has more.
The Office of the United States Trade Representative released Biden's 2023 trade policy agenda Wednesday. It includes a U.S.-Taiwan 21st Century Trade Initiative, an ambitious new trade framework that will deepen long-standing economic and cultural ties. It also realigns U.S.-China trade relationships, saying, China, as a large non-market economy, is uniquely able to distort the marketplace through unfair anti-competitive practices which harm workers and businesses in the United States and in other countries, including some of our closest allies and partners. It goes on to say that by unduly concentrating production of certain goods in China, these non-market policies and practices undermine supply chain resilience and harm consumers that, in the long run, are deprived of the innovation and choice that fair competition would produce. US Trade Representative Catherine Tai said that the worker-centered trade agenda is realizing President Biden's vision to grow the American economy from the bottom up and the middle out. Beijing has repeatedly said Washington should implement pragmatic policies on China that bring a return to a healthy and steady relationship. Meanwhile, the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee voted Wednesday to give President Biden the power to ban Chinese-owned TikTok. It would be the most far-reaching U.S. restriction on any social media app. Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson said banning TikTok is unreasonable. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
The death toll from a head-on collision between two trains in central Greece on Tuesday night has increased to 43. An operation to find survivors continued Thursday amid the mangled, burnt-out wrecks of the two trains that collided in North Greece in what is said to be the country's deadliest rail crash. The impact just before midnight Tuesday threw some passengers into ceilings and out of windows. Meanwhile, protesters scuffled with police in Athens after a candlelit vigil outside the offices of the train operator Hellenic Train. Police fired tear gas at rock-throwing protesters who lit fires on the streets. The station master in charge of signalling has been arrested and charged with causing mass deaths through negligence. That's the news. Thanks for watching.